Life moves at a breakneck pace, doesn't it? Things are always changing around us. Our circumstances probably aren't going to be the same tomorrow as they are today. And they're certainly not going to be the same a month from now as they are today. And the actual pace of that change seems to be speeding up as well. And so I'm always looking for what matters. What are the things that we can hold on to in all of the circumstances of life? And I have to believe, if we're going to continue doing what we're doing and call ourselves what we call ourselves, that Jesus must have some wisdom in that category. You see, long before the story was told that Jesus was born of a virgin and that Jesus rose from the dead, Jesus drew a crowd. And there had to be a reason why he did that. And I believe the reason why he did that is he offered wisdom, he offered teaching that meant something to people in the midst of the circumstances that they were in. And so I think the stories that Jesus told, the stories that were told about Jesus, have something to offer us about the way that life works best. In many of Jesus' parables and Jesus' miracles, there's a common thread that runs through it. It's a thread that mystic and priest Cynthia Bourgeault calls the divine exchange. That to the extent that we're willing to let go and release whatever it is that we hold on to, our eyes are opened to the abundance of God and the abundance of life. I think you see that in the story that Terry just read for us, this short little parable that Jesus told of this farmer who was particularly successful, had more than he needed, more than he could sell. And so he started to focus his energies on how to protect that he had. He built a new barn. He installed better locks, bought better security systems, so that he could hold on to what he saw is rightfully his. And Jesus reminded his listeners at that time, and I believe is reminding us, that tomorrow something could come and burn down that barn. And then what are you left with? Jesus tells another story about a landowner that was leaving for a period of time. And he wanted his servants to take care of and steward his property. So the story goes that he gave one servant 5 talents, and talents is just a unit of currency. Another servant 2 talents, and still another servant 1 talent. And we're familiar with the way that story goes. The servant that got the 5 talents, he went and used that and invested it and was able to make 5 more talents. The one that had 2 talents was was able to take those talents and use them and employ them and bring back 2 more talents. The one that had 1 talent, he took that talent and he buried it. And so the master, the landowner, came back, and the one with 5 talents said, "Here, I made you 5 more." The master says, "Well done." The other one that had 2 talents brings back the 2 and additional 2. The master says, "Thank you, well done." Then there was the one that had the 1 talent and simply hid it and brought back, "Well, I still have that 1 talent." So that servant with the 1 talent, he didn't embezzle. He didn't take the 1 talent and run, but he hid it and just brought back the one which displeased the landowner, the master. He says, "What have you done? Look at what these others have done." Now, we can fall into traps in reading that. And so a lot of times we think about that story and bless our capitalistic hearts. We think that this is a story about investing and how we should invest and how we should employ our money. And I don't think that's where Jesus was coming from at all. And then sometimes we take the word itself, talent, literally, and how we're supposed to use our talents, and if we don't, we're in big trouble. But I think if we look under the surface, if we kind of lift the page of the printed story and try not to see it, and I know it's hard without seeing it through our Western eyes, that I think what Jesus is saying here, what Jesus is trying to get across to the hearts and minds of listeners, is whatever we have is to be put into use. It's not just to be held, not just to be grasped, but to be released. The Gospel of Thomas is a gospel that we don't find in our New Testament and was actually just discovered just decades ago, actually. There were many, many, many gospels. 4 made the final cut and ended up in our Bible, but there were many others. And the Gospel of Thomas doesn't have miracles or stories at all. They just have sayings of Jesus, and instead of chapter and verses, they're logions, they're called. So Logion 70 says this: "If you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you fail to bring forth what is within you, what you fail to bring forth will destroy you." Pretty strong words. And sometimes folks look at that saying and they say, well, we each have our special gift that we have to employ. And that's not untrue. But I think what that saying is getting at, it's not the final product that's important. It's the process. Jesus, who at the very least we have to believe held the spiritual wisdom of the ages, the life wisdom of the ages, is saying that life doesn't work if we just hold on, if we're just grasping. Michael Brown is a South African spiritual leader, and he wrote the book, The Presence Process. And here's what he said. He calls this divine exchange, giving is receiving, with hyphens, so that it's all one word. And in his book, The Presence Process, he said this: exchange is the very nature of divine life, of consciousness itself, according to the modern neurological science. And all things share in the divine life through participation in this dance of giving and receiving. Giving is receiving. Jesus understood it. It's in the very structure of the Beatitudes that Terry also read for us. Blessed are the merciful. Why? Because they will be shown mercy. And in the prayer that we say together, at least every Sunday, and maybe some of us say it at other times throughout the week, the prayer that Jesus taught the disciples, there's a vertical exchange. At the very beginning, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. There's this exchange. And then there's a vertical exchange as well. Forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. Exactly. It's a process that goes all through life. And it's not just stuff that's written in a 2,000-year-old book. Science catches up with these spiritual truths. And I don't know if you're like me, but a lot of times I'll say, I'd like to believe that, but I'd like to see a little bit of proof before I start living like that myself. And here's the catch with that, is we can't see it until we live into it. There's part of our brain called the amygdala. It's a little almond-sized part of our brain. And so that's the part of our brain that's probably been with us the longest, and it's what keeps us safe. It's the fight or flight. And so when we get stressed, when we get anxious, when we get scared, that old part of our brain still takes over and makes us want to fight or makes us want to flee. And when we get into that space, we kind of just grasp. And that's the only thing that we can see. And we hold on to what we have, and we're going to fight anyone that tries to take that away from us. And the problem is, when that part of our brain takes over, we can't see anything else. And I think so often you see that. I mean, I see it in my own life, and I think we see it so often in the life of society, especially now. There's all kind of folks that are raring for a fight about something. And yet Jesus explains a better way. Jesus explains the 5 loaves and 2 fish that can feed a multitude. The history of evolution is a history of increased complication and joining together. Back in the primordial soup, there were 2 H's and 1 O that found their way to one another. 2 hydrogen atoms and 1 oxygen atom, and they combined to create water, which gives us life. If you take those 2 H's and that O apart, then there is no more water. I think the wisdom of Jesus revealing the wisdom of God is this. There is abundance as we come together. And as we see the abundance in the world and in one another, and not just ourselves. How do we experience that? How do we engage that? Jesus understood that as the process of kenosis, the process of letting go. Letting go sometimes of our money, but this is not a money sermon this morning. money holds so much weight in our culture that it's a pretty good indicator of where we are in this. But it's not the only thing at all. Can we let go of a little bit of the power that we hold? Can we let go of a little bit of our ego? Can we let go of some of those grievances that we've been carrying around for 2 years, 5 years, 30 years? And here's what happens. If we become willing to let that go and to move out of that grasping place to a place that's more relaxed, where we're able to be a little bit more loose and stand up straight, then what happens is the lens of our perception is cleaned and cleared. And maybe, now this is something that we have to try. It's not dogma, it's an experiment. But maybe we start to see the abundance, the enoughness that's all around us. And then it becomes a cycle. So as we see that a little bit, then we become a little bit less anxious, a little bit more willing to let go a little bit more, which in turn allows us to see even more of the beauty and the enoughness of the universe. Let's pray together.